7 Russian submarines. One coordinated attack against American naval task force operating in international waters. Standard Wolfpack tactics refined through decades of Soviet and Russian naval doctrine. Multiple submarines attacking simultaneously from different directions to overwhelm defensive capabilities and ensure at least some torpedoes reach targets. The mathematical advantage was clear. 7 submarines with dozens of torpedoes versus surface ships with limited anti-submarine weapons and detection capability. Russian naval planners had calculated this engagement scenario countless times. Every simulation predicted significant damage to American surface fleet before submarines could be effectively countered. What actually happened in 20 minutes of combat rewrote anti-submarine warfare doctrine and revealed something about American undersea warfare capabilities that intelligence services worldwide are still trying to understand. But the reason why 7 Russian submarines were all destroyed before they could cause any damage to American fleet has nothing to do with superior sonar or better torpedoes. It was one tactical decision American commanders made that Russian planners never anticipated. And understanding that decision requires waiting for the revelation that changes everything about modern submarine warfare. Just weeks ago, Russian Northern Fleet Command authorized deployment of 7 attack submarines to conduct surveillance and potential strike operations against American naval forces in region where both nations maintain strategic presence. The submarines were modern vessels with experienced crews trained specifically for Wolfpack operations that Soviet doctrine developed during Cold War. Intelligence indicated American Naval Task Force was operating with limited anti-submarine escort, perfect target for coordinated submarine attack that could demonstrate Russian undersea capability and potentially damage American strategic posture. Russian submarines deployed in dispersed pattern that allowed them to converge on target from multiple bearings simultaneously while maintaining sufficient separation to avoid mutual interference. It was textbook submarine warfare that every Russian submarine officer studies extensively. Welcome to Andrei Navy Report, where naval power analysis meets operational reality. Hour 0. Russian submarines detected American Surface Action Group approximately 200 kilometers from their patrol areas. Standard procedure required maintaining surveillance while closing to attack range without alerting American forces to submarine presence. Russian submarines are quiet. Not as quiet as American submarines, but quiet enough to remain undetected at reasonable ranges when operating carefully. The 7 submarines began approach patterns calculated to achieve firing positions simultaneously from different bearings. The coordination required was complex. Submarines communicating through occasional low-probability intercept transmissions, maintaining formation discipline while submerged, timing movements to achieve coordinated attack. But this was exactly what Russian submarine forces train for. Wolfpack tactics are central to Russian undersea warfare doctrine specifically because they overwhelm defenses that can handle individual submarine threats but struggle against multiple simultaneous attacks. Hour 2. Russian submarines reached positions approximately 50 kilometers from American surface group. This is the critical decision point in submarine warfare: how close to approach before initiating attack. Closer approach increases hit probability but also increases detection risk. Russian doctrine emphasizes achieving firing position that optimizes hit probability while maintaining tactical surprise. 50 kilometers was assessed as optimal balance, close enough for high-confidence torpedo shots, while far enough that American anti-submarine defenses wouldn't have detected submarine presence yet. Or at least that's what Russian commanders believed based on intelligence assessments about American anti-submarine warfare capabilities. Those assessments were about to prove catastrophically wrong. But here's where the situation starts revealing what Russian intelligence didn't understand about American anti-submarine capabilities. That American Surface Action Group wasn't operating alone. It was operating with underwater support that Russian intelligence hadn't detected, because that support was American attack submarine, maintaining position several dozen kilometers from surface ships specifically to detect and engage approaching threats before they could threaten surface forces. American submarine warfare doctrine emphasizes using submarines to hunt submarines, recognizing that best anti-submarine weapon is another submarine. Russian planners knew Americans employed this tactic sometimes, but intelligence suggested this particular surface group wasn't operating with submarine escort. That assessment was wrong, and that error was about to cost Russian Navy 7 submarines. Hour 3. Russian submarines prepared to fire. The coordination was impressive. 7 submarines in position to launch torpedoes simultaneously from different bearings, creating crossfire situation American defenses couldn't effectively counter. This is exactly the scenario Russian doctrine predicts achieves successful attack. But American submarine that Russian intelligence didn't know was present had been tracking Russian submarines for past hour as they approached. Not just detecting them, tracking their precise positions, movements, and tactical intentions. American submarine had underwater advantage that Russian submarines didn't appreciate. American submarine was significantly quieter and had significantly better passive sonar. It could hear Russian submarines while remaining undetected itself. That detection asymmetry gave Americans complete tactical picture of Russian wolfpack before Russians even knew American submarine was present. Hour 3, minute 40. American submarine transmitted tactical data to surface ships and requested authorization for engagement. Standard anti-submarine doctrine would have surface ships launch helicopters with dipping sonar and torpedoes to engage Russian submarines once detected. But American submarine commander requested different authorization, permission to engage all 7 Russian submarines using coordinated heavyweight torpedo attack before Russian submarines could launch their own weapons. This request was controversial in real time because it meant potentially starting full-scale engagement before Russian submarines had actually attacked. American submarine had detected Russian preparations to fire, but Russians hadn't actually launched yet. Attacking first meant accepting responsibility for initiating combat rather than responding to Russian attack. That decision, whether to strike first based on detected preparations or wait for Russian attack and respond, was made by Task Force Commander within approximately 2 minutes based on assessment that Russian attack was imminent, and waiting meant accepting damage to surface ships. Hour 3, minute 42. Authorization granted. American submarine launched 8 Mk-48 heavyweight torpedoes in rapid succession. Not all against single target, calculated spread, engaging multiple Russian submarines with weapons programmed to home on specific acoustic signatures American submarine had been tracking. The weapons were fired from position where American submarine could maintain track on all targets while remaining outside effective detection range of Russian submarines that were focused on approaching surface ships. This is the fundamental advantage that quieter submarine has in undersea warfare. It can shoot first while remaining undetected. Russian submarines were focused on maintaining attack coordination against surface group. They weren't expecting submarine threat from direction. American submarine was positioned. Hour 3, minute 45. First Russian submarine detected torpedo approach. Standard doctrine requires immediate evasion and launch of counter-torpedoes if available. But detection came too late. Mk-48 torpedoes are fast, intelligent, and persistent. Once locked on target, they're extremely difficult to evade. Russian submarine attempted evasive maneuvers and launched countermeasures. Ineffective. First torpedo impact occurred at hour 3, minute 47. Catastrophic damage. Submarine began emergency surface procedure but couldn't maintain buoyancy. Within 3 minutes, first Russian submarine had sunk. But the attack wasn't just against one submarine. American submarine had engaged 7 targets with 8 torpedoes using targeting solution that prioritized threats based on their attack geometry against surface ships. The remaining Russian submarines detected torpedo approaches nearly simultaneously and recognized they were under coordinated attack. Russian wolf pack tactics work when pack maintains surprise against prey. But Russian submarines had lost surprise and were now prey being hunted by opponent they didn't know existed. The tactical situation reversed completely within seconds. Russian submarines attempting to attack American surface group were now fighting for survival against American submarine they couldn't effectively locate or counter. Hour 3, minute 50. Second and third Russian submarines hit by torpedoes. Russian submarine commanders made decision to abort attack on surface ships and focus on self-defense and survival. But effective self-defense against submarine attack requires knowing where attacking submarine is located. Russian submarines couldn't detect American submarine with sufficient precision to target it. They launched torpedoes toward approximate bearing of incoming American torpedoes, but without high-confidence targeting solutions, those shots were essentially defensive fires, hoping to deter rather than destroy. American submarine had acoustic advantage that allowed it to detect and evade Russian torpedoes while maintaining track on Russian submarines and guiding additional weapons to target. Hour 3, minute 53, fourth Russian submarine destroyed. At this point, remaining 3 Russian submarines made decision to disengage and attempt escape. Standard doctrine when submarine attack fails is break contact and withdraw to regroup. But breaking contact requires either getting beyond detection range of pursuing submarine or creating sufficient acoustic confusion that tracking is lost. Russian submarines attempted both. They launched acoustic countermeasures designed to create false targets and mask their acoustic signatures. They maneuvered at high speed, attempting to open distance from American submarine. But American submarine maintained track through countermeasures using sonar processing capabilities. Russian submariners apparently didn't realize Americans possessed, and American submarine was fast enough to maintain pursuit while remaining outside effective counter-detection range. Hour 3, minute 58. American surface ships joined engagement. Once Russian submarine positions were precisely localized through American submarines targeting data, surface ships launched anti-submarine helicopters with additional torpedoes. This was overkill from tactical perspective. American submarine had situation controlled, but it demonstrated integration between submarine and surface forces that made Russian submarine escape impossible. 5th and 6th Russian submarines were engaged by helicopter-launched torpedoes at hour 4-minute 2, both destroyed within 3 minutes. Hour 4, minute 7. 7th and final Russian submarine attempted to escape through emergency deep dive beyond normal operating depth. This is desperation tactic, diving deeper than recommended limits, attempting to reach depth where pursuing weapons can't follow or lose track. Russian submarine design emphasizes deep diving capability specifically for this kind of emergency. But Mk-48 torpedo is capable of deep operation and maintain track. Final Russian submarine was destroyed at hour 4-minute 9 at depth exceeding 400 meters. 20 minutes from first torpedo launch to destruction of 7th Russian submarine. 7 submarines eliminated before they could successfully attack American surface forces. 0 damage to American ships. The wolf pack that was supposed to overwhelm American defenses was eliminated entirely by defensive tactics Russian intelligence hadn't predicted were possible. Russian submarines had approached what they thought was isolated surface action group, vulnerable to coordinated attack. They'd actually approached surface group protected by American submarine with acoustic superiority so overwhelming that 7 Russian submarines were detected, tracked, and destroyed before they could achieve their mission. Now for the revelation that reframes everything about this engagement. Remember how American submarine detected Russian submarines before Russians detected American submarine. That advantage wasn't just because American submarine was marginally quieter. American submarine was operating with technology that Russian intelligence didn't know Americans had deployed operationally. Specifically, American submarine had artificial intelligence-enhanced sonar processing system that could detect and track multiple quiet submarines at ranges where traditional sonar systems would miss them in background noise. The AI system could identify acoustic patterns that indicated submarine presence, even when those patterns were below traditional detection thresholds. That capability meant American submarine had effective detection range, approximately double what Russian submariners believed was possible based on their intelligence about American sonar capabilities. Think about implications. Russian wolfpack tactics are predicated on submarines achieving attack positions without being detected. If defender can detect submarines at ranges where submarines believe they're still undetected and approaching unobserved, the entire tactical foundation of wolfpack operations collapses. Submarines that think they're hunting are actually being hunted by opponent they can't detect. That's exactly what happened here. 7 Russian submarines approached American surface group believing they had surprise and tactical initiative. American submarine had been tracking them for over an hour, knowing their positions, movements, and intentions while remaining undetected. When American submarine engaged, Russians were tactically unprepared because they didn't know they were already being targeted. For Russian submarine force, this engagement revealed catastrophic vulnerability in their operational security and tactical doctrine. Wolfpack tactics that worked during Cold War era don't work against modern American detection capabilities that Russian intelligence hadn't accurately assessed. 7 submarine loss in single engagement is unprecedented. Peacetime disaster that forces complete reassessment of whether Russian submarines can effectively operate against American naval forces or whether acoustic advantage Americans possess makes Russian submarines vulnerable whenever they attempt to engage American ships. That strategic question Effects. For American submarine force, this engagement validated controversial deployment of AI-enhanced sonar systems that some analysts worried were not reliable enough for combat operations. The system performed exactly as designed, detecting multiple quiet targets at extended ranges and maintaining track through tactical maneuvers that would have lost traditional sonar contact. That validation means future American submarine operations will increasingly rely on AI processing for detection and tracking, further widening acoustic advantage over opponents who don't possess comparable technology. The broader lesson applies to all naval warfare. Technology that provides detection advantage before opponent knows they're detected is decisive in ways that raw firepower cannot match. American submarine didn't defeat Russian Wolfpack through having more torpedoes or better weapons. It defeated Russian submarines by detecting them first and maintaining track while remaining undetected itself. That detection asymmetry allowed Americans to achieve complete surprise and destroy entire submarine formation before it could execute its attack. Russian submarines were outmatched not by superior weapons, but by superior awareness that made their weapons irrelevant because they never got opportunity to fire them effectively. Which factor dominated this engagement? A. Superior American submarine quieting that made detection impossible. B. Better American C. AI-enhanced sonar that detected Russian submarines at ranges beyond what Russian intelligence predicted, enabling first strike before Wolfpack could attack. The answer is C. American submarine was quiet, but not completely undetectable. American torpedoes were effective, but not revolutionary. Decisive advantage was detection capability that gave Americans complete tactical picture before Russians knew they were being tracked. That detection advantage through AI sonar processing is what enabled 20-minute destruction of 7 submarine Wolfpack that should have been able to inflict significant damage on American surface forces. Can adversaries counter this detection advantage? Not easily. Matching American AI sonar processing requires technical capabilities most navies lack and training in employing AI systems most submarine forces haven't developed. Even matching technology doesn't guarantee matching effectiveness because American advantage is built on decades of acoustic signature databases and sonar processing algorithms that competitors can't quickly replicate. Russian submarine force must fundamentally reassess whether Wolfpack tactics remain viable against opponent with detection advantages they didn't know existed until 7 submarines were lost, demonstrating that advantage catastrophically. What does this mean for future submarine warfare? Quieting remains important, but detection capability, submarines that can detect opponents before being detected themselves, have decisive advantage that makes other factors less relevant. American investment in AI-enhanced detection systems has created capability gap that competitors struggle to bridge. Future submarine doctrine must account for opponents potentially having detection capabilities beyond what technical intelligence predicts because this engagement demonstrated that capability surprises are possible and can be decisive. Russian Navy learned that lesson at significant cost. Other submarine forces should understand implications before experiencing similar losses. This engagement proved that assumptions about submarine warfare developed during Cold War era may not apply against modern detection technologies that can find quiet submarines at ranges previously considered safe from detection. 7 Russian submarines lost in 20 minutes because they operated based on intelligence about American capabilities that was wrong. American submarine with AI sonar detected, tracked, and destroyed entire wolf pack before Russians understood they were being hunted. That outcome demonstrates detection advantage through modern technology can overcome numerical and tactical advantages through operational surprise that makes weapons and numbers irrelevant when opponent can shoot first from position of complete awareness. Subscribe to Andre Navy Report, where naval power analysis meets operational reality, where underwater warfare reveals that detection advantages through AI processing create asymmetric capabilities that traditional tactics cannot overcome, where 7 Russian submarines demonstrate that Wolfpack operations are obsolete against detection systems that see submarines before submarines know they're being watched, where 20-minute engagement proves that awareness dominates firepower, when opponent who sees everything destroys opponent who sees nothing. Every single engagement teaches lessons about how technology changes warfare in ways that doctrine must account for or repeat mistakes at catastrophic cost.